individual. I am the drinking water. I am with the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund with the Department of Health. I am the Cultural Environmental Program Specialist for that program, which you will hear about a little later today. But first off, we have Alex Daly with Indian Health Services. So take it away.
Well, hey, thank you, Scott. Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Well, hey, thanks to everyone that's listening in, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you briefly. Yeah, my name is Alex Daly. I am the director for the Indian Health Service Portland area Division of Sanitation Facilities Construction, which is a mouthful, but is the organization within IHS that works specifically with tribes on sanitation facility issues, so water, wastewater, and solid waste. Now, I'm fairly new to this position. I took this role on in March, but I'm not new to IHS or the Portland area. As a matter of fact, prior to my current role, I worked at headquarters for a while, but prior to that, I was the district engineer in our Spokane district office. So I have about 17 years of experience with IHS in total. I'm happy to be in this role and looking forward to working with tribes and hopefully getting out of my house at some point and coming to visit you guys. I'm looking forward to that. The Portland area covers Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, and the 43 federally recognized tribes in those states. And again, as I mentioned, the DSFC works with tribes to identify and address sanitation facility deficiencies. So again, water, wastewater, and solid waste issues. Can go to the next slide, Scott. So I'm just going to talk a little bit, pretty briefly, about some of the types of services we provide, and give you guys some contact information in the next slide for following up with some of our local offices. Just a little bit of background on the program authority, or where IHS gets the authority to provide the program that we do. Public Law 86-121 was passed in 1959 and established the sanitation facility program. And what was sort of unique about that is that it was specifically written to be a cooperative exchange of services, and was really one of the first pieces of legislation to really promote Indian self-determination. So we're not here just to provide services. We're here to help tribes work together to build capacity, to operate and maintain sort of self-sustaining utility organizations. So some of the things that we do list here: we maintain an inventory of sanitation deficiencies. Some of you may have heard what we call the SDS list, which is our sanitation deficiency system list. We are required to report that annually to Congress. We inform them of the level of sanitation need in Indian country, and that's important because it then influences the amount of funding that our agency gets to address those needs. We develop multi-agency sanitation projects. So again, we work with tribes, we work with other federal partners and local agencies, state agencies, to address the issues that we identify with the tribes. We bring our own funding, and we can also work with other agencies to, their funding can come through us, or there's lots of ways we can get the work done. Yeah, so we provide funding, as I mentioned. Each year, Congress appropriates an amount of funding for us, and that gets divided up amongst the areas based on what we have in the list. So, where we can work with you guys to make sure we're identifying all of the needs, that then helps influence the share of funding that we get. So it's important for us to, be working with you guys each year to keep that list current. We can provide professional engineering design services. So as part of the sanitation projects that we develop, we have local staff, local engineering staff that work with the tribes to design these projects. We get separate funding for those engineering design services. So that's separate from the project funding that we apply towards the deficiencies. And then last year, we can provide technical consultation and training to improve operation maintenance capacity. So that's aside from fixing things. Again, like I mentioned, we are interested in helping tribes develop capacity within their utility organization. So we have other folks that are more dedicated toward the O&M side of things and help troubleshoot issues with existing systems, help the tribes develop things that can improve their operation and maintenance capacity, things like helping develop asset inventories and preventive maintenance plans, ordinances to cover water and wastewater issues, things like that. So our funding types, there's 4 main types of funding that we get each year. Just briefly on those, the regular funds is a pot of money that we get to address issues with existing homes. So again, those are the projects that we develop and manage through the sanitation deficiency system. When we identify, a deteriorated water main that's leaking, we can scope that, put that on the list. It gets prioritized and ranked, and goes into the process to ultimately get funded if it raises high enough on the list. The housing support funds is a separate pot that we get for new or like new homes. So in addition to addressing sanitation needs with existing systems, we also support infrastructure for new homes, and there's a different sort of eligibility criteria that gets met for those types of funds, but essentially they're for either new housing or housing that's considered like new or as good as a new home. 2 sort of smaller pots of money that we get are special project funds and emergency project funds. So these are things that headquarters sets aside a little bit of money each year to do some special investigations or studies, or address imminent public health problems related to sanitation facilities. So if an emergency comes up, we have a limited pot of money to address those kind of things, but we can work with tribes to determine how we can assist. Okay, so next slide. So again, on the O&M technical assistance, just want to touch on that a little bit further. It's something that we don't always, I think, advertise as well as the project side of things. But some of the technical assistance that we can provide on the O&M side are the sanitation facility surveys. We work with EPA on those. We can help develop composite utility drawings, operator training, technical assistance and troubleshooting on issues that develop. Again, the capacity development, data system management. So we manage a data system for tribal organizations, similar to the list that we maintain for sanitation deficiencies, and just general sanitation facility project support. So we want to make sure that the projects we develop are projects that can be operated and maintained by the utility organizations, because we transfer those facilities to the tribes at the end of every project. And again, just maintaining those interagency agreements with our other federal partners and other agencies. So I provided some contact information there for our local district offices. The Spokane district works with Eastern Washington and Idaho tribes. Commander Steve Sauer is the district engineer there. The Olympic district covers Western Washington. Commander Roger Hargrove is the engineer there. And the Western Oregon district, which covers the Oregon tribes and also oversees the Yakima field office, which works with the Yakima Nation in Umatilla. Lieutenant Derek Hansey is the district engineer there. So I think that's it. I think the last slide is just a thank you. Yeah, so there's my contact information as well. Again, I'm really happy to just provide some information about Indian Health Service and what we do. Look forward to working with folks, and I understand we can take a few questions now or later on after the panel is finished, in my understanding, if that's correct.
Alex, yes, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we can get to them now, or if you think of them later, please, you can still put them in the chat and we will get back to them at the end of the panel.
If it's later, please identify who you're asking the question of.
Yes, thank you. Please do that. So it looks like we'll just move on to our next presenter, which is Darla O'Connor from USDA Rural Development.
Did I push all the right buttons? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I never know. I never know. So good morning. My name is Darla O'Connor. I'm with USDA Rural Development, a community program specialist. And rural development is this small little portion of USDA. You know, we know nothing about cows and chickens and all that, but little part of USDA that has about a little over 40 programs that can literally build a community from the ground up. And they include such as housing, business, electrical, broadband, and then community programs, which is, of course, my favorite because I know that one, that consists of water environmental programs in the community facilities. We'll start with water environmental programs. The types of projects that we can fund all have to do with water environmental. So drinking water, sewer projects, wastewater projects, solid waste, and stormwater, all to protect the environment. We do provide loans, grants, and loan guarantees also in rural areas that may be over 10,000 in population. We can do guarantees or if the guarantee is warranted. Right now, the interest rate is 1.75, and that's on intermediate rates. And our rates are based on the median household income of the community, the area that's being served. And right now, we're still basing it on the 2010 median household income. 220 hasn't come out yet. As soon as that comes out, then everything will change, as far as what the rates in your community may change. We do have a market rate and we have a poverty rate. Poverty rate, you would have to have a public safety component, a health and safety component to that as well. Depending on what the project is, and most with water environmental programs, the term can be up to 40 years. And right now there's a lot of old pipe being replaced, and that's all 40 years. The pictures that I have on the side is a wastewater treatment plant and a solid waste project that we did on tribal land, on reservation. My borrowers, this program, we lend to tribes on reservation land, federally recognized tribes, as well as public bodies and nonprofits. There's no prepayment penalty to the loans, so you can pay off at any time. It's a loan, it can be a loan and grant mix, grant dollars, depending on if it's needed for the project to make the project successful. We also have native set-aside grants. They've been up to 2 million, and they're based on, of course, median household income, but then also the per capita income. So we would need to research and see what that per capita income is for the reservation. We have pre-planning grants to help out in lower income areas to develop a complete application. And it would cover items like the preliminary engineering report, or maybe the NEPA, the environmental report, to help with those costs to get a complete application. And our complete application now is done online, but the items that we need for that is, your financials, of course, your budget, your operating budgets, and then your environmental, if it's required for that type of project, and a preliminary engineering report. We don't need plans and specs in order to fund the project. Then we could fund the project, put the money aside. You can tell your engineer to get going on those plans and specs. And then we just continue on with the project. So we do have pre-development planning grants to help with those costs for low-income areas as well. 40 years, 1.75, full application. Like I said, it's done online. And just get a hold of me or there's other specialists also in the other parts of the state that do the same program, and I can get you in contact with them depending on where you are located. And that's the water environmental program. Next. Then we have the community facility program, and that's a fun program too because it's hard to define community facilities. It's basically anything that benefits the community. You know, it can be from daycares. I've done little plastic slides all the way up to hospitals, government, you know, the administration building, and then equipment, fire stations, the fire trucks, the radios. I've done the radios. We've done community gardens, clinics, public works equipment, street sweepers. If it benefits your community, then it's probably a community type facility that we could fund. Same types of borrowers, tribes, public bodies, and nonprofits. We do have loans and grants. Grants are our allocation typically is small, so they're usually used for equipment, small equipment. Right now, our interest rate is 2.125, and also depending on what the project is, I can go up to 40 years, no prepayment penalty. The interest rates on both programs, they change quarterly depending on what the, I guess the treasury, the market rate is. And, but when your application is complete, it's submitted, we've approved it, and we're ready to obligate the funds, it's obligated at the interest rate that is offered at that time for the life of the loan. So you would always know what your interest rate is and what your payment is going to be while you continue to do your planning. Up to 40 years, I think I've covered it. If there's anything that I'm not covering, please put in the chat box a question. But Community Facilities Fund Program, because it covers so many items. We can purchase, construct, improve any type of community type facility. Next, my contact information. We cover the state of Washington. I'm up in the northwest corner. We have community program specialists that cover the rest of the state in 3 other offices. So if you have questions or you want to get in contact with one of them and you're located in another area, please contact me and I'll get you in contact with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Darla. Yeah, again, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will get to them. And if you don't have any now, but have some later, again, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. Just let us know who they're for. Okay, well, we will keep moving then. Thank you, Darla. Next is Daniel Thompson with Ecology Water Quality.
Great, thank you, Scott. I will just start my video for a bit just to say hi to everyone and then shut it off. Let's see how this works. Hello, everyone. I'm Daniel Thompson, the Department of Ecology. And I want to just take, I guess, a few minutes and talk about our Department of Ecology's Water Quality Combined Funding Program, or the WQC. WQC is an integrated funding program. It's currently composed of 4 different distinct funding sources, and 3 of those we can use to fund infrastructure projects. So I'll just talk about those 3 programs. And as I said, it's an integrated funding program, WQC. What we've designed is to simplify things for applicants, at least to the best of our ability. So for example, we have a single funding application. We have a single application review process that uses 2 quasi-independent reviewers from different ecology regions. And then we ultimately issue a single funding offer list that covers all the funding sources and all the types of projects that we can fund. We also have a single funding guidelines, even though the 4 programs that are currently composed of WQC are covered by different statutes and rules and policies. And it's a hefty, 275-page document, but it's organized so that, by and large, folks can just go to the sections that are applicable to their project type and not have to read the entire document. So among the 3 infrastructure funding sources in WQC, the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, or the CWSRF, is far and away the largest. CWSRF is a low interest rate loan program. So it's loans that you have to repay, but we have a really low interest rate. And most years we also have the authority to award a few $1 million in forgivable loans. And forgivable loans, a forgivable loan is it's basically a grant, but it's done under our loan program. So we call it a forgivable loan instead of a grant. Our loan terms can run up to 30 years, depending on the life of the infrastructure being built. CWSRF is funded through a federal grant, and of course, there's a required state match, but it's mainly funded from recycled payments from previously awarded loans. Since 1989, we've awarded, I think it's like $2.2 billion in CWSRF funds for projects. And CWSRF can fund pretty much any part of a wastewater or stormwater project. Another infrastructure funding source is the Centennial Clean Water Program, or Centennial. Centennial is a grant program. It's funded from different state sources depending on the budget year. Most of our Centennial goes to fund wastewater construction projects in small hardship communities, but can also be used to fund a limited range of stormwater projects as well. And then the last of the 3 infrastructure funding sources in the WQC is the Stormwater Financial Assistance Program, or SFAP. SFAP's a grant program. It's usually our 2nd largest funding source. It's funded from different, over the years, it's been funded from different sources, but as of about a year or so ago, we've got a solid funding source. It's the Model Toxics Control Act Fund, or MOTCA. SFAP grants can be they're more limited than the flexible CWSRF because they can only be used for stormwater projects. So not quite as flexible, but we can fund a lot of stormwater projects with SFAP grants. So the general types of infrastructure projects that WQC can fund are wastewater facilities and stormwater facilities. And for each of those, we can fund pretty much the entire project from pre-planning, such as doing a feasibility study, all the way through actual planning, such as developing, writing, or updating a facility plan, through pre-design, such as doing environmental review or other pre-design work, through developing and submitting final design plans and specifications, all the way through to construction completion. So we can fund such projects pretty much from concept to construction. And all 3 of the infrastructure funding sources have some level of hardship subsidy options available. For example, CWSRF, we can use it to provide 50% forgivable loan, 50% standard loan, combination for any pre-construction work for wastewater or for stormwater facilities in smaller, less affluent communities. And under Centennial, we can provide up to $5 million in grant for wastewater construction projects in smaller, economically challenged communities. And with those grants, there's no match required for it. And even under SFAP, which is a grant program with a match requirement, we can provide reduced match grants for stormwater projects in smaller, less affluent communities. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so under all 3 of the infrastructure funding programs, only public bodies are eligible to apply or even be awarded funding. Eligible public bodies for CWSRF and Centennial are relatively broad, include cities, towns, counties, special purpose districts, such as sewer districts and irrigation districts, and most importantly for this panel, any federally recognized tribes in the state. Under SFAP, the eligible applicants are more limited, but tribes are still eligible as long as the funding goes to a city, town, or port district of tribal land, or to a county doing their supporting work on tribal land. And our WQC funding levels vary year to year because they're dependent, at least in part, on state budget appropriations for Centennial and SFAP, and also on federal grants for the CWSRF. But over the last several years, the average amount's been roughly $120 million for CWSRF SRF, but that's growing. It's 150 million, for example, in our current funding cycle. I think it was 180 million last year. It's been roughly 15 million a year over the last several years for Centennial, and roughly $35 million a year for SVAP grants. Currently, by rule, we run an annual funding cycle for WQC. We start taking applications and we conduct applicant training workshops across the state in middle August, and we stop accepting applications in middle October. So there's roughly a 2-month window to submit applications after the annual funding cycle opens. Then we do a whole bunch of internal processing, and eventually end up issuing a draft funding offer list in the middle of January each year. And then that draft list, we provide it to the legislature during budget development. It also triggers a required public process, which includes accepting public comments. Then we usually make some funding adjustments based on budget appropriations and comments we receive. And then ultimately we issue a formal funding offers in the form of a final funding offer list, which usually comes out around the beginning of the state fiscal year on July 1st, which is also when the state budget kicks in and the appropriations in it become available. So that's a quick overview of WQC. We provide a much longer and more thorough overview at our funding workshops. So if you're interested, you're encouraged to attend those when they happen again next August. So with that, if we have any questions, I'll try to answer them, or we can answer them at the end. But even after today, if you have questions, here's my contact information, or you can follow that web link that's at the bottom of the slide and navigate our web pages. You can find more specific information about the funding sources, and also more specific contacts depending on what type of project you're thinking of. So with that, thank you. Are there any questions?
I do not have any in the chat box at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll give it one more minute to see if anyone has any questions. They're typing out. Okay, well, let's move on now to the Community Economic Revitalization Board, or CURB.
All right, thank you. Hi, I'm Janae Delk. I'm the Executive Director and Tribal Liaison for CURB. If you go to the next slide. So who is CURB? CURB is an independent rural policymaking board, which is a fancy way to say it is a cabinet agency from the governor's office, and we are housed within the Department of Commerce. CURB was created in 1982 to invest in public infrastructure to support Washington's economic future. Our board is made up of 20 members, 6 small and large businesses across the state, as well as stakeholder groups such as ports, counties, cities, tribal, as well as an economist, general public member. We also have 4 legislative members, 2 from each chamber, and then 4 advisory ex officio members who are non-voting from Employment Security, Department of Revenue, Department of Commerce, and Department of Transportation. We are primarily a loan program. We do have grants available for our planning program, and we do have grants available to combine with loans for construction, and that's based on the health of the community that's applying, or the tribe that's applying. We're the opposite of a bank. We look at debt service coverage ratio, which is another term for a credit score, and the lower that is, the more grant you can get, and the lower the interest rate is. Next slide. So CURB is designed to finance public infrastructure construction to support private business development and assist local governments with economic development planning. And so you'll hear a lot from infrastructure programs across the state and a lot of federal programs that their focus is more health and safety. And we are for economic development, and we qualify that with public or job creation and retention, as well as private investment, increase in tax revenue, and the like. And we are not a competitive program. We are first come, first serve. Our board meets 6 times per year and awards projects at every meeting. Next slide. So eligible jurisdictions, as you can see, pretty much all local governments and federally recognized tribes. One thing I would like to highlight, when tribes are looking at projects, sometimes it makes sense for maybe a county to take it on, or a port, and a tribe to partner with them, or for the tribe to take a lead and then partner with their neighboring communities, such as we have a project currently with Ferry County as the applicant, looking at broadband in the area, but they're partnering with the Colville tribe. We also have some broadband projects here in Thurston County where Nisqually tribe is the lead, because they can move a bit quicker than Thurston County or the Port of Olympia. So just keep that in mind. There's also ways to do phases of projects or portions of projects that might make sense for a tribe to take it on versus a neighboring jurisdiction. But we can help you kind of decide which is the best path to take when looking at a project. Next slide. So our programs, we have 4. So as I mentioned, we have a planning program, and that is a grant program up to $50,000. We have two ways that we focus on it for traditional economic development that leads to help building public infrastructure, recruiting industry, creating jobs. And then we have broadband. Each one of these components has minimum requirements that need to be completed during the study. It's kind of the common thread between all of our studies that we pay for. When a community is looking at planning, they can do a multitude of things, but those minimum requirements are required to be completed during that study. And then we have committed private partner. The next 3 are construction loan programs. This program is for projects where a local government or tribe needs to build public infrastructure to support private business, to help them site, expand, or be retained, create and retain jobs. And then ultimately that committed private partner will be completing its own private capital projects separate from what CURB is investing in. And then prospective development, planning has been done either through CURB or other resources, but they meet those minimum requirements that I mentioned before. And then a project is deemed feasible. We call it kind of the build it, they will come model. So public infrastructure is needed to recruit private industry to the community. It will help job creation and leverage that private investment. And then we do have a rural broadband program, which is more focused on community development. It's not so strong on the economic development component of job creation. If broadband is needed for committed private partner, both committed private partner and prospective development can also fund broadband, but our rural broadband has a different kind of twist to it. So planning again has been completed, meets those minimum requirements, it's deemed feasible, and project is in a rural county or community. All of our tribes are considered rural communities, whether you're in a rural county or an urban county. And then the project is in an unserved or underserved area. And then project has a committed ISP. Next slide. So these are the things that we can fund. So the activities are on the left and the systems are on the right. As I mentioned, broadband can be funded through all 3 of our construction programs, just with different missions of why it's being built. We have a wide variety of the different systems that we can fund. We were built to be pretty flexible to businesses' needs. So we don't have a strict of like what kind of infrastructure it is, as much as, you know, as far as technology and as times change. We have been here for 38 years. So obviously, when we were created, broadband wasn't an issue or telecommunications wasn't an issue. We had phone lines. So we have been built to be flexible and kind of ebb and flow as times change. Next slide. So how does CURB work? As I mentioned, we're a bit different. We're not competitive. We are first come, first serve from the very start. We do provide technical assistance. CURB is a small program and we do cover the whole state. There's myself and 1 outreach person and then our program assistant who helps with the back end of what we do. But staff provides technical assistance to communities for project development. So as you have ideas, and even if you're in that planning stage or a little bit farther down the path, we ask that you call us early and often and let us get in on that, that idea plate. To go in front of the board. We really put the time in to look that the project is the right project at the right time for our applicants. And once we deem that we're ready to go, then applications are due 8 weeks prior to each meeting, and staff works with the client to vet the application and the project prior to it going to the board. Everything gets sent to the board, the application and what we call our project analysis with a staff recommendation for funding gets sent to the board. The board, as I mentioned, meets every 2 months to review applications. At that meeting, the applicant presents a proposal to the board. So if you have a committed private partner, that committed private partner is with you. If it's broadband, that committed ISP is with you the day of the board meeting. I've heard that CURB is kind of like Shark Tank. We do not have a Mr. Wonderful. We are all about saying yes. We're not trying to say no. Really doing all that front end work gets us to a really high success rate with the board. And then the applicant will know that day if their project is approved. So 8 weeks from the time you apply, you will know if your project is approved. Sometimes that technical assistance can take about 6 to 18 months, depending on where you are with your project and where our funding cycles are. Next slide. Oh, there you go. So what happens after the project is approved? We have a window called pre-contract conditions, 4 months for planning, 6 months for construction. Planning, you're looking at a finalized scope of work, evidence that your consultant has been selected, evidence that match is secured. And then for construction, it's a little more in depth. It's resolution of repayment of the loan, attestments that environmental work has been done, attestments that permits are in hand or will be in hand prior to needing them, cultural resource review with Department of Archaeology, Historic Preservation, and all interested tribes. I do that work. You just have to submit the Easy One form, and I do all the consultation. And then evidence that match is secured and evidence that private investment is secured if it's committed private partner. Once we have all of those documents, then we go to contract, and the contract is signed between our applicant and our CURB chair. And then project timelines. For planning, you have 2 years to complete your project. On average, from the time we go to our contract is executed till it's complete is about 5 months. In construction, we allow 4 years, but average is about 6 months from that contract execution. And that really leads to all that upfront work that we did before an applicant even applies, allows that project to be able to move quickly. And then project tracking. We are the government, so this is our one string attached. We check in on all of our projects on the even years for 5 years after the public project is completed. And so if it's committed private partner, we're asking if that partner is still there, how many jobs they have on site, do they supply medical benefit for their employees and dependents, what's their average wage, as well as what is their private investment. And then ask if there's any ancillary businesses who have cited to that area. Again, with prospective development, we ask who those businesses are who have cited there after it was built. For broadband, it's a little bit different. We ask for how many ISPs are there, how many connections and at what speed for household businesses and anchor institutions. Next slide. So this is just an overview by county. You'll see the dollar amount is our historical investment since 1982 through 2019. And then the hard hat, how many projects we've had in that county. Most recently at our July meeting, we did, or a September meeting, we did approve a project for the Port of Friday Harbor. So in San Juan County, so we are officially in all of the counties across the state. Next slide. And then talking again about that project tracking, we have invested $194 million in the last 38 years across the state, leveraged $5.7 billion, and created just over 35,000 jobs. If you'd like more information about the projects that we've invested in, we do have our legislative reports on our website. We also have fact sheets for the last couple of years for projects that we've invested in, and they are grouped by meeting. So you can see the vast variety of different projects that we have done across the state. And I think the next slide is just a thank you slide with my contact information. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I do not have any at this time.
Wonderful, Jeanette. Thank you so much. We'll give it 1 minute just to see if anyone has any questions they're typing out. And again, if you don't think of a question right now, but have one at the end of our presentation, you can.
That cat, his name is Mouse.
Janae, this is Dan with RCAC.
Hey, Dan.
Could you go back to the map page that you had?
Scott, can you go back to the map page?
Yeah,
There you go. Yeah.
that's the one. I noticed that Whatcom, Snohomish, King, Pierce, Kitsap, and Spokane, Benton, Clark, they're all a different colors. Does that represent that they're entitlement counties?
They're urban counties based on, based on OFM's definition of population per square mile.
So does CURB treat them any differently than others, or are they just identifying them as urban?
Yeah, so urban, per our statute, only gets 25% of our biennial appropriation, at least for the first 18 months and the first 20 million. It's like kind of complicated. And then if you're a true urban community in that urban county, like a Spokane, Seattle, Tacoma, you do not qualify for grants of any kind. We can reduce the interest rate, which is currently 1 to 3%. That can be reduced by a multitude of things. If you're in a distressed county, if you take the loan out for a shorter amount of time, and then again, what that debt service coverage ratio is. The board has identified rural communities within those counties based on, again, population. So if you're in a city or town or port that is under 20,000 people, then you would, again, qualify for those grants. And then, as I mentioned before, the board has determined all federally recognized tribes as rural, no matter where their location is. However, if you are in one of those urban counties, we only have that 25% set aside for the first 18 months. So there might be limitations on funding amounts throughout the year or throughout the biennium.
Okay, well, thank you for the explanation.
Yeah,
appreciate
thank
it.
you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. Move on now to Janet Cherry with the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund with the Department of Health.
Hey, great. Thanks, Scott. Good morning, everybody. And I'm going to go off video so it does not interfere with my audio. So thanks for having me this morning, and thanks to IACC board for getting us together virtually. I'm Janet Cherry of the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund Program. Drinking Water State Revolving Fund Program provides low interest loans and limited grants for drinking water infrastructure improvements and studies. I have our webpage listed there at the top of the slide. I encourage you to visit our webpage where we have a lot of information posted about our funding programs, along with information on upcoming webinars. We are funded by an EPA grant every year. For context, last year our grant was $24.6 million. The largest revenue stream that funds our program are the repayment dollars from past projects we funded, and that's right at $40 million per year. Because we are federally funded in part, we do have to attach a lot of federal requirements to our funding agreements. Some of those federal requirements are American Iron and Steel, the cultural and environmental review process, which Scott oversees, also Davis-Bacon wages, disadvantaged business enterprise requirements. So we do have a lot of federal requirements with our funding, but it is a great funding source for drinking water projects. For our tribal jurisdictions, any tribal water system is eligible, provided the project is not receiving EPA set-aside funds. So if the project is receiving some part of EPA set-aside funding, then our funding can't be used. So that is real important to remember. We do have a number of funding programs. I'll start with our construction loan. This is our biggest funding program. Every year we accept applications October 1st to November 30th. It is a competitive process where we score and rank projects based on the health risk being addressed. Types of projects that are eligible for our funding are any water infrastructure improvement projects such as a new source, treatment, replacement of pipe and reservoirs. We also have a category of projects identified for resiliency. These are projects that help you respond to a water shortage or outage event. Example resiliency projects we funded are seismic retrofits or improvements to an existing reservoir, installation of generators at your primary sources, or an intertie with a nearby water system that can be used in the event you lose your sources. To be eligible water systems for this funding is any water system classified as a Group A community water system and a not-for-profit non-community water system. One of our eligibility requirements is that you have a current approved planning document. This planning document is the tool we use in our program to make sure you comply with the federal requirement of having adequate technical, managerial, and financial capacity. The planning document is pretty involved. We have quite a process in place for the planning document to be done. If you are in need of a planning document to access our funding, please contact me and we will meet with the appropriate regional office staff to help you better understand the requirements for a planning document. And also Scott Kugel put together a very nice tribal brochure that has a lot of good information on that. And Scott, I think you're going to make that available on our webpage and also on the IACC webpage or after the conference here. The maximum award per jurisdiction is $5 million. This is a loan. It has a 1.75% interest rate, and it's a 20-year loan term. We do have the ability to award subsidy or principal forgiveness on our loans, and that is based on what's called the affordability index, which is the ratio of your water rates to the median household income. In the event $5 million is not enough for your project, we are more than happy to partner with other funders that you've heard from today, such as CURB or Rural Development, so please let us know. Also, we can collaborate with Indian Health Services on the project. If they're taking lead on design, we'll work with them on the project also. So that's our construction loan. New this year, or I'm sorry, next year, starting in 2021, we will be offering pre-construction loans. I apologize, we don't have information posted to our webpage yet on this funding opportunity, but we will be posting information soon. So applications will be accepted year-round till we exhaust funding, and this funding opportunity again available January 2021. If your water system is classified as a Group A community water system or a not-for-profit non-community water system, you're eligible to apply. Projects that can be funded with the pre-construction loan is anything that leads up to construction. So design, permitting, cultural and environmental reviews, doing a planning document, those are all eligible activities. The maximum award is $500,000. It's a 0% interest loan. No subsidy available, and 10-year loan terms. So that's our pre-construction loan. Very excited we're able to offer this. Next slide. We have an emergency loan program. It's open year-round. There's no requirement to have a planning document to access this funding. Eligible applicants are any Group A not-for-profit community water system serving fewer than 10,000 people. We define an emergency as any time you find yourself out of water. It does not have to be tied to a natural disaster. So if you have lost your main water source and aren't able to meet your demands, you're running out of water, or you're in a situation where you're out of water, please contact us. We'd like to help you out. The maximum award is $500,000. It's a 0% interest rate and 10-year loan term. And we just found out our funding can be used if you've received FEMA funding and need to supply a match to that funding. Our funding can be used, so that is good news. A new program we started this year and will offer again next year is water main replacement loan. This can be used to replace any old water main, distribution main, or transmission main. We'll accept applications in August of 2021. Eligible applicants are any not-for-profit community water systems serving fewer than 10,000 people. The maximum award per jurisdiction is $1 million, 1.75% interest rate, and 20-year loan term. So again, we'll offer that in August. We have one grant program. It's a Consolidation Feasibility Study Grant Program. This allows interested jurisdictions to study possible consolidation. So a consolidation would be if two or more water systems are combining into one larger water system, or where there's a change of ownership for the system. Applications are accepted every year in August. Group A, not-for-profit community water systems, water district, PUDs, counties are eligible, so tribal entities would be eligible to apply if you are interested in a consolidation with a nearby system. These are $30,000 grants. They can be used to study the cost of the consolidation. Usually there's infrastructure that will be involved if the consolidation happens. So this funding helps you study the project, better understand project costs, do public outreach, any legal fees, those are eligible. So there's my name and number at the bottom. Please call me if you have questions. I'd be happy to work with you on a project if you have one in mind. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Janet. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to, again, put them in the chat. And Janet's contact information is here, and everyone's contact information will be on a slide at the very end. So if you didn't catch that earlier, it will be there at the end. We'll just give it a minute to see if anyone is typing things out right now. All right, Tom, why don't you take it away?
All right. Hey, thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Tom Carney. I'm with the HUD Office of Native American Programs out of Seattle. Also, we call ourselves the Northwest ONAP, Northwest Office of Native American Programs. And we, although we got the state of Washington pictured there, we work with the 42 federally recognized tribes in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. And just in general, we are work in conjunction or coordination and work very well with others, state and federal entities, including those groups that have presented before me today. The ONAP programs can't necessarily carry a complete infrastructure project, except in limited circumstances and basing on scope and cost. But we combine and work very well with the other programs, and so we're always very happy to be a small or large part of any of the infrastructure projects here in tribal communities in the Northwest and especially the state of Washington. And the map there just shows the general location of the 29 federally recognized tribes here in the state of Washington. Next slide, please. I'm just going to kind of touch on some of our core programs. And these are our standard or programs that have been pretty consistent over the years and not hone in on any of the CARES Act funding, which there was, recently been a flurry of activity within the federal government to respond and work with the COVID-19 situation. The ICDBG, or Indian Community Development Block Grant, is a annual competition. It'll be coming out sometime this spring. I would say probably February, March timeframe. There's an allocation to the Northwest for the Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, historically around $3.5 million. With the funding maximums that we have of between $500,000 to $750,000, we're only able to fund 6 to 7 applications each year, or grants each year. We get probably 18 to 20 inquiries or grant applications. Although there's a focus on low to moderate income Native American families, it's not required to strictly be low to moderate income. You just, the higher percentage of low income folks that you plan on serving, generally the more points you get in this competition. And it is a competition, and it's not limited to just infrastructure. Infrastructure is eligible, but we're also funding community facilities, housing to some degree, as well as infrastructure. Historically, one of the very popular infrastructure projects that we've seen using the Indian Community Development Block Grant is housing infrastructure. Getting in the water, sewer, streets, street lights, streets, etc. That's set up for other funding to come in and maybe build out the homes. That's been a very popular approach and very successful historically. Again, but ICDBG will be coming out next spring. In addition to that, we have sort of an offshoot of the ICDBG program, which is called the Imminent Threat, or ICDBG Imminent Threat. The core criteria is that there's an imminent threat to health and safety that's come up. And that can be anything from a failed water lines, a septic field, or a sewage situation that's been broken or is no longer safe to serve the community. There's an annual set aside for that at the national level, and it's non-competitive, but it is first come, first serve. So it's one of those things, if you have a situation that you think might qualify to be considered as an imminent threat,